Take one more step, and you may not get another, Sergeant Colbert shouted, but Evelyn Mercer was already beyond the red boundary stakes. 30 yards ahead, recruit Noah Bennett stood frozen in the middle of a gray, wind-scoured field, one boot planted beside a patch of soil that looked no different from any other. The training map lay useless on the ground near the command post, its digital display dark after the signal failure. No one knew which route was still safe. No one except the quiet woman with the limp. Evelyn stopped and let the cold Wyoming wind move past her. Her left leg trembled beneath her weight, a small betrayal hidden by an old brown boot and years of practiced stillness. Behind her, officers crowded the boundary line while young recruits who had laughed at her only hours earlier stared without speaking. The field stretched nearly the length of 3 football fields, broken by dry grass, shallow depressions, and rusted warning markers left from a training range sealed long before most of them had enlisted. Evelyn did not look back. She watched the earth. A bent weed leaned against the wind. A strip of pale gravel disappeared beneath darker soil. One metal marker faced east while every other marker faced north. Small details. Quiet details. The kind people missed when fear made them search for something obvious. Ms. Mercer, Colonel Nathan Holloway called, his voice controlled but tight, returned to the line. The disposal team is 12 minutes out. Noah's breathing carried across the open ground. 12 minutes might as well have been 12 hours. Evelyn shifted her weight, and pain climbed from her ankle to her hip, sharp enough to blur the edges of her vision. She waited for it to pass. Then she took another careful step. A sudden crack sounded behind her. Dakota, the dark bay Mustang tied, near the command vehicle, pulled free from the startled handler and trotted toward the field. Barrett reached for the trailing rope and missed. "Stop that horse," someone yelled. Dakota slowed at the red stakes, but did not cross. His ears turned toward Evelyn. His breath rose in white clouds. Evelyn finally glanced over her shoulder. For a moment, the noise of the bass faded. No shouting, no radios, no wind against sheet metal. Just the woman and the Mustang watching each other across the boundary. She raised one hand, palm down. Dakota became still. "Stay," she said softly. The horse lowered his head, but kept his eyes on her. Evelyn turned back toward Noah. He looked young now, younger than the uniform made him seem. "Ma'am," he called, his voice unsteady. "I don't know where to move." "Then don't move," Evelyn answered. She studied the ground between them, not searching for a path marked on paper, but for a path remembered by the land itself. At the command post, Holloway stared at the uneven rhythm of her steps. Something about it disturbed an old memory he could not name. Rain, smoke, and a shadow walking toward him through a valley everyone else had abandoned. Evelyn moved forward again. One measured step, then another. Her limp did not disappear. She carried it with her like a compass built from pain. Dakota crossed the red line behind her. 36 hours earlier, Evelyn Mercer drove through the gates of Fort Red Mesa in an aging blue pickup with Dakota standing quietly inside the horse trailer behind her. Morning light stretched across the Wyoming plains, turning the dry grass gold and sharpening the red cliffs beyond the base. At the security checkpoint, the guard studied her civilian identification, then glanced at the medical brace visible beneath the cuff of her left pant leg. "Mustang evaluation program?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. "I'm here for Dakota." The guard looked toward the trailer as a dark muzzle appeared between the slats. "Good luck. That horse has already sent 3 trainers home early." Evelyn gave the Mustang a brief look through the mirror. He did not send them anywhere. They chose to leave. By the time she reached the training grounds, the first group of recruits was finishing a timed run. Their boots struck the dirt in a steady rhythm as Sergeant Colbert called out their remaining seconds. Evelyn parked near the stables, stepped down from the truck, and waited for the stiffness in her left leg to release. It did not. It rarely did. She closed the door and walked toward the trailer with the uneven pace she had learned to carry without apology. Tyler Grant noticed her first. He was tall, confident, and surrounded by recruits who laughed whenever he expected them to. "Is that the new riding instructor?" he asked loudly. She looks like she needs the horse to carry her. A few recruits turned. Someone snickered. Tyler took 3 exaggerated steps, dragging one foot through the dust as he copied her limp. More laughter followed. Evelyn heard every sound. She kept walking. Dakota did not. The Mustang shifted inside the trailer, striking the floor once with a hard, warning thud. The laughter faded for half a second, then returned. "Easy, cowboy," Tyler called toward the trailer. "We are only joking." Evelyn unlatched the rear gate, but did not open it. She stood beside the trailer, one hand resting against the metal, and waited. Dakota's breathing slowed beneath her palm. Sergeant Barrett approached with a clipboard tucked under one arm. His eyes moved from Evelyn's leg to the horse trailer. "Evelyn Mercer?" "Yes. Your file says behavioral assessment and search terrain conditioning." "That is correct." Barrett looked unconvinced. "Dakota does not accept a saddle, does not follow commands, and does not tolerate crowded spaces. The base veterinarian called him unsuitable for service." Evelyn opened the gate. Dakota backed out slowly, muscles tense beneath his dark bay coat, ears moving toward every voice and every footstep. The recruits gathered nearby, expecting a struggle. Evelyn did not reach for the lead rope. She did not order him forward. She simply stood 12 feet away and turned slightly, giving him room to choose. The Mustang watched her. Dust moved between them. A metal flag hook tapped softly against a nearby pole. 1 minute passed, then another. Tyler folded his arms. Maybe he is waiting for her to limp over there. Dakota's head lifted. Evelyn spoke without looking at Tyler. He listens to tone before words. The Mustang took 1 step toward her, then a second. When he reached Evelyn, he lowered his head until his forehead rested against her shoulder. "Nora updaiten." No command was given. Sergeant Barrett stopped writing. Tyler's smile disappeared. Evelyn placed one hand against Dakota's neck and felt the last of his tension leave. "He is not difficult," she said quietly. "He just remembers who tried to control him before earning his trust." By mid-morning, the stable yard had grown unusually quiet. Recruits who had gathered to watch Evelyn fail now stood along the fence, pretending they had remained only because their training schedule had placed them there. Dakota followed her into the round pen without a lead rope, his dark bay coat catching the pale, Wyoming sunlight. Sergeant Cole Barrett leaned against the gate with his clipboard, still searching for a reason to dismiss what he had seen. "Walking toward you is not the same as following instruction," he said. Evelyn ran one hand along Dakota's shoulder, feeling the small shifts beneath his skin. "No," she replied. "It is more important." Tyler Grant exchanged a look with the recruit beside him. Maybe she plans to talk him into becoming useful. Evelyn did not answer. She stepped away from Dakota and crossed the pen with her uneven stride. The Mustang remained where he was. She stopped near the opposite fence and turned, not facing him directly, but leaving one shoulder open. For several seconds, nothing happened. Dust moved across the ground in thin lines. A distant training whistle sounded from the obstacle course. Dakota lifted his head, studied her posture, then crossed the pen and stopped at her side. Evelyn moved again. He followed. When she slowed, he slowed. When she stopped, he stopped. There was no rope between them. Yet the space separating woman and horse seemed more precise than any line Barrett could have drawn on a training field. "He is watching her breathing," one recruit whispered. Another shook his head. "Horses do not do that." Master Sergeant Daniel Cross, who had supervised military working animals before transferring to Fort Red Mesa, spoke from behind them. "They do when someone knows how to listen first." Barrett glanced toward him, surprised by the support. Cross did not explain. His attention remained on Evelyn's feet. She placed more weight on her right side whenever she changed direction, but her upper body never signaled discomfort. The limp belonged to her leg. The discipline belonged to everything else. Near the administration building, Colonel Nathan Holloway had paused on his way to a briefing. He was a broad-shouldered man in his early 50s, known for remembering names, schedules, and mistakes long after everyone else had forgotten them. He watched Evelyn guide Dakota around the pen without touching him. Something about the way she positioned herself stirred an old uneasiness in him. Not recognition exactly, more like the outline of a memory hidden behind weather. He saw gray rain against a windshield, a ridge disappearing beneath low clouds, a voice telling him to place his boots exactly where hers had been. Then the image vanished before he could hold it. "Who is she?" Holloway asked. Barrett straightened. "Civilian contractor. Evelyn Mercer. She was sent to evaluate the Mustang." Background: equine rehabilitation, search terrain conditioning, some emergency management certificates. Nothing unusual. Holloway continued watching. Dakota suddenly startled when a transport truck dropped a metal loading ramp nearby. Several recruits stepped back. Evelyn did not move toward the horse. She lowered her shoulders, softened her stance, and waited. Dakota's muscles trembled. His ears turned from the truck to Evelyn, then back again. She breathed out slowly. The Mustang matched her, releasing the tension through a long breath of his own. Holloway's expression changed. He had seen people calm, frightened animals before. He had also seen trained soldiers restore order without raising their voices. Evelyn did both with the same stillness. "Nothing unusual," he repeated quietly. Tyler called from the fence. "Can he actually do anything besides follow you around?" Evelyn looked toward a narrow obstacle lane beside the pen, where hanging canvas, loose boards, and bright markers had been arranged to test a horse's confidence. She opened the gate. Dakota studied the unfamiliar path, then looked at her. Evelyn stepped forward with her left foot dragging slightly through the dust. The Mustang followed beside her, matching the imperfect rhythm. Exactly. The obstacle lane ended near the eastern edge of the training grounds, where the open prairie narrowed between two low ridges. Evelyn guided Dakota past the hanging canvas and loose boards without touching the lead rope. The Mustang hesitated only once, when a sheet of bright plastic snapped in the wind, but Evelyn stopped with him, waited, and let him decide when to move again. By the time they cleared the final marker, even Tyler Grant had stopped smiling. Sergeant Cole Barrett checked his watch as if the time could explain what skill had already made obvious. "That proves he can follow one person," he said. "It does not make him suitable for field work." Evelyn looked beyond him toward a row of faded warning signs bordering an unused section of the base. Most of the signs faced north, their red lettering dulled by years of sun and dust. One sign, near the bottom of the ridge, faced east. She stopped so suddenly that Dakota stopped with her. The change was small, almost nothing, but Colonel Nathan Holloway noticed it from a nearby path. Evelyn studied the sign without moving closer. The bolts holding it to the post were clean, where rust should have covered them. A narrow line of pale soil ran beneath the base, and a shallow wash cut through the grass several yards beyond it. The rain from the previous night had been brief, but heavy enough to move loose ground downhill. "Who maintains the eastern boundary?" she asked. Barrett glanced toward the signs. "Range control. When was it last inspected?" 3 weeks ago." Evelyn's eyes remained on the ground. "It needs to be inspected again." Barrett closed his clipboard. "That area has been inactive for years." Inactive does not mean unchanged. Tyler stepped closer to the fence. "Are you saying the sign moved?" Evelyn pointed without crossing the marked line. The sign was turned. The soil beneath it was disturbed. Water cut a new channel from the ridge. Whatever the boundary meant before the storm, it may not mean the same thing now. Barrett gave a short breath that was almost a laugh. "You are here to evaluate a horse, Ms. Mercer." Dakota's ears shifted toward the ridge. Evelyn placed one hand against his neck. "I am evaluating the ground he may be asked to cross. This is a military installation. The boundaries are surveyed, recorded, and approved. Paper records weather better than dirt." Barrett's expression hardened. "That is enough." Master Sergeant Daniel Cross had moved closer during the exchange. He crouched beside the nearest safe marker and looked at the wash Evelyn had indicated. He did not step beyond it. "She is right about the runoff," he said. "The water came through recently." Barrett looked at him. "That does not make the range unsafe." "No," Cross replied. "It makes the old assumptions worth checking." Holloway joined them, his attention fixed on Evelyn. What exactly do you see? She answered without drama. A boundary marker turned after the soil shifted. A drainage line that did not exist when this section was last mapped. Grass pressed flat in a direction the wind did not make. Something heavy moved under the surface. The recruits grew quiet again. Tyler looked at the field, then at Evelyn's left leg. How can you tell all that from here? For the first time, her expression changed. Not fear, not pride, something older. Because ground remembers pressure, she said. A metal flag hook struck the pole behind them, once then twice. Evelyn's hand tightened against Dakota's neck. The sound carried her somewhere none of them could see. Gray rain. A hidden valley. 6 sets of footsteps following hers. Then she blinked, and the prairie returned. Barrett turned toward the recruits. Training continues tomorrow, as scheduled. Evelyn watched him walk away. Not on the eastern route, she said. He did not look back. The route stays. Dakota lifted his head toward the ridge and refused to take another step. The next morning arrived beneath a low ceiling of gray clouds, with cold wind moving steadily across Fort Red Mesa. Evelyn was already at the stable before sunrise, brushing dust from Dakota's coat while the first transport trucks rolled toward the training grounds. She had slept little. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the eastern marker turn toward the wrong horizon. At 6:30, a whistle sounded beyond the stable wall. Sergeant Cole Barrett assembled the recruits beside the navigation course and explained the exercise in a voice designed to carry across open ground. Teams would move through a series of marked checkpoints, recover a communications unit, and return within 40 minutes. The eastern route remained part of the course. Evelyn stepped out of the stable with Dakota beside her. Sergeant Barrett. He did not look pleased to see her. Ms. Mercer, this exercise does not involve the horse program. The boundary has not been checked. Range control cleared it at 5:45. Did they inspect the ground? Barrett lifted the tablet in his hand. They reviewed the survey data. Evelyn looked toward the ridge. That is not what I asked. Several recruits exchanged glances. Tyler Grant stood near the front, no longer mocking openly, though doubt still showed in his face. Noah Bennett adjusted the strap of a field radio across his chest. He was quieter than the others, a careful young man who always checked his equipment twice. Barrett lowered his voice. You made your concern known. Command reviewed it. This discussion is over. Evelyn studied him for a moment, then turned toward Colonel Nathan Holloway, who stood near the command vehicle. He had heard every word. Sir, she said, the map is using an old drainage boundary. Holloway looked from Evelyn to the digital display. The safer decision would have been to delay. The official decision had already been made. Around them, schedules were moving, instructors were waiting, and a full training day depended on the course opening on time. We will keep the teams inside the marked lane, he said. No one crosses the warning stakes. Evelyn's face remained calm, but her hand closed around Dakota's lead rope. Markers only work when they're still marking the right place. Barrett called the teams forward. Boots moved into formation. The exercise began. For the first 15 minutes, everything appeared normal. Recruits advanced between checkpoints while instructors tracked their positions on the command screen. Tyler's team reached the second marker ahead of schedule. Noah's team approached the communications station near the eastern ridge. Then the radio on Noah's shoulder slipped free, struck the ground, and rolled beyond a faded white post. It stopped less than 6 feet away. Noah hesitated. An instructor shouted for him to leave it. The wind carried the warning unevenly across the field. Noah looked back, uncertain whether the order had been meant for him. Then he stepped beyond the post. Dakota's head rose sharply. Evelyn turned before anyone else reacted. The Mustang pulled against the rope, every muscle tightening beneath his coat. Noah bent toward the radio. The soil near his right boot settled with a soft, hollow sound. Not an explosion, not an impact, just earth shifting where solid ground should have been. Evelyn's voice cut across the field. Do not move. Noah froze with one hand extended. Barrett reached for his radio. The command screen flickered once, then went black as the ridge blocked the relay signal. A second recruit started toward Noah, but Evelyn raised her hand. Nobody enters that lane. The laughter from the previous day was gone. Wind moved through the dry grass. Dakota stood rigid beside her, staring toward the young man in the field. Noah slowly lifted his eyes. "Ma'am," he called, barely louder than the wind. "What do I do?" Evelyn looked at the turned marker, the disturbed soil, and the route everyone else had trusted. "Nothing," she said. "You wait for me." Sergeant Cole Barrett ordered every recruit to hold position while Colonel Nathan Holloway called range control over the emergency channel. Static answered first. Then a strained voice confirmed that the nearest safety team was 12 minutes away and approaching from the Western Access Road. Barrett pointed toward the route displayed on a backup tablet. "They will enter here, move along the marked lane, and reach Bennett from the west." Evelyn looked at the screen only once. That route is no longer there. Barrett turned sharply. "It is on the official survey. The survey was made before the runoff changed the slope." "You cannot know that." Evelyn pointed toward the field. A narrow strip of gravel curved away from the western lane, disappearing beneath a darker layer of soil. Several warning stakes leaned in the same direction, as though the earth beneath them had moved. Water came down from the ridge and carried the surface 6 feet east. "Your map shows where the boundary used to be." Noah remained frozen near the fallen radio, his breathing quick enough to reach them between gusts of wind. Holloway studied the tablet, then the ground. "Range control says the western approach is clear." Range control is reading the same map. Barrett stepped closer to Evelyn. "Then what do you suggest?" "We ignore procedure because a horse trainer has a feeling." Dakota pulled against the lead rope before Evelyn could answer. His ears flattened toward the western access lane. Barrett handed the rope to Tyler Grant and walked several steps in that direction. Dakota refused to follow. Tyler tugged gently. The Mustang planted all 4 hooves and lowered his head. "Come on," Tyler said. "It is clear." Dakota moved backward instead. Evelyn watched the grass near the horse's feet. The stems along the western lane trembled in an uneven pattern, not from the wind, but from loose soil shifting beneath the surface. "Stop pulling him," she said. Tyler released the rope immediately. Dakota became still, but his attention remained fixed on the ground ahead. Barrett looked from the horse to Evelyn. Animals react to unfamiliar terrain. He crossed unfamiliar terrain yesterday. Her voice stayed quiet. "He is reacting to instability." Holloway raised the radio again. "Range control, suspend a western approach." Barrett stared at him. "Sir, that leaves us without an entry route. It leaves us without a route we can trust." The command area fell silent. For the first time since the exercise began, official procedure had no answer ready. Noah called from the field. "Colonel, my right foot is going numb." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. He had been standing in the same position too long, fighting the urge to shift his weight. Fear would soon make the decision for him. "Noah," she called, "keep your eyes on me. Do not look down. Breathe in for 4 counts and out for 6. He tried. The first breath broke halfway through. Evelyn repeated the rhythm until his shoulders lowered slightly. Behind her, Master Sergeant Daniel Cross examined the turned warning marker. He brushed dirt from its base and found an old stamped symbol beneath the newer paint. 3 letters and a number. His expression changed. He looked at Evelyn, then at the uneven way she carried her left leg. "Where did you learn to read ground like this?" he asked. Evelyn did not answer. She removed her coat, handed it to Holloway, and tightened the worn brace beneath her pant leg. Barrett blocked her path. "You're not entering that field." Evelyn met his eyes. "Then tell me who will reach him before fear makes him move." No one spoke. Dakota stepped to her side without being called. Evelyn rested one hand against his neck and looked toward Noah. "The map is wrong," she said. "The land is not." Evelyn handed Dakota's lead rope to Tyler Grant and stepped toward the faded red stakes. "Keep him here," she said. Tyler wrapped both hands around the rope. "What should I do if he pulls?" Evelyn looked at the Mustang, then back at Tyler. "Do not fight him. Listen to what he is telling you." Sergeant Cole Barrett moved in front of her again. "Ms. Mercer, I cannot authorize a civilian to enter a restricted area." "Then do not authorize it." Her voice was so calm that the words carried more weight than a challenge. Colonel Nathan Holloway studied her face. Evelyn, tell me you have done this before. A gust of wind lifted a strand of brown hair across her cheek. She did not brush it away. I have brought people home from places where maps stopped being useful. The answer changed something in Holloway's expression, but there was no time to ask what she meant. Noah shifted his shoulders in the distance. My leg is cramping, he called. Stay with my voice, Evelyn answered. She removed the thin brace from beneath her pant leg and placed it beside her coat. Without its support, her left ankle turned slightly inward. Barrett stared at it. You need that. I need to feel the ground. She stepped across the boundary. Pain traveled up her leg immediately, sharp and familiar. She let it pass through her without changing her breathing. One step, then stillness. The recruits watched from behind the stakes, their earlier confidence replaced by complete silence. Evelyn did not search for anything dramatic. She studied the small language of the field, the way rain had pressed one section of grass flat, the places where dust had settled differently, the faint changes in color where the surface had shifted. She moved only when the ground gave her a reason. Behind her, Dakota pulled once against the rope. Tyler tightened his grip. Easy, he whispered. The Mustang pulled again, harder this time, his eyes fixed on Evelyn. Do not drag him, she called without turning. Tyler loosened the rope. Dakota stopped fighting. For several seconds, horse and woman remained still on opposite sides of the boundary. Evelyn lifted one hand, palm down. Dakota lowered his head. Stay, she said. She continued forward. Her uneven steps formed a slow rhythm across the open field. Holloway watched the pattern and felt the buried memory return more clearly. A storm-dark valley, a damaged radio, a quiet figure moving ahead of him while everyone else waited for instructions that never came. He gripped the edge of the command table. Cross, he said softly. Run her name through the sealed personnel archive. Master Sergeant Daniel Cross moved to the backup terminal. I already tried the standard system. Not the standard system. Cross looked at him, then understood. In the field, Evelyn stopped less than halfway to Noah. The wind shifted. A rusted marker tapped against its post with a thin metallic sound. Her face went still. For one heartbeat, Fort Red Mesa disappeared. Gray rain returned. 6 people waited behind her. Someone called her by a name no one at the base had spoken in years. Wayfinder. Evelyn closed her eyes, breathed once, and opened them again. Noah was still watching her. You're doing fine, she told him. I have not done anything, he said. Sometimes that is the hardest thing. She took another step. Behind the boundary, the archive terminal flickered. Cross leaned closer as a sealed record opened across the screen. At the same moment, Dakota tore the rope from Tyler's hands and crossed the red line after her. Dakota crossed the boundary with the loose rope. Trailing behind him, and every person near the command post reacted at once. Tyler Grant lunged forward, but Sergeant Cole Barrett caught his arm before he could follow. Do not move, Barrett ordered. The Mustang took 3 quick steps into the field, then slowed as Evelyn turned toward him. Her face did not show surprise, only concern. Dakota, she said, her voice low and steady. The horse stopped. Wind moved through his mane. His ears remained fixed on her, waiting. Evelyn raised one hand and held it there until his breathing matched the rhythm of hers. Easy. Dakota lowered his head, but he did not retreat. Behind the boundary, Tyler stared at the empty rope still lying across the dirt. I lost him, he whispered. Barrett did not answer. No one was watching Tyler anymore. They were watching the woman in the field and the Mustang who had chosen to follow her. Evelyn studied the space between them. She did not call Dakota directly to her. Instead, she shifted one step to the right, paused, and waited. The horse watched the movement, then placed one hoof forward. He stopped exactly where she stopped. Evelyn moved again. Dakota followed the same quiet line, leaving several yards between them. At the command terminal, Master Sergeant Daniel Cross barely looked away from the sealed record on the screen. Colonel, he said, but Nathan Holloway lifted one hand. Not yet. The words sounded less like an order and more like a request for the past to remain silent a little longer. In the field, Evelyn reached a strip of darker soil and stopped. Dakota stopped behind her. She looked toward him, then toward Noah Bennett, who was still standing rigid near the fallen radio. "Noah, keep watching me," she called. "Do not watch the horse. Do not watch the ground. Just watch me." Noah nodded, though his face had gone pale in the cold. "Is he safe out there?" "He is listening." "To what?" Evelyn glanced at Dakota. "To everything we forgot how to hear." She moved forward. The Mustang followed with careful patience, not because he understood the danger, but because he trusted the woman ahead of him. The distance between Evelyn and Noah narrowed slowly. 20 yards. 15. 10. Her limp became more pronounced without the brace, each step carrying a visible cost. Still, her shoulders remained level. Her breathing remained quiet. Dakota matched the uneven rhythm behind her, one steady hoofbeat after another. At last, Evelyn reached Noah. She did not touch him immediately. "Tell me your name," she said. His eyes widened. "You know my name?" "Say it anyway." "Noah Bennett." "Where are you from?" "Boise, Idaho." "Who is waiting for you there?" His breathing caught. "My mother. My little sister." "Good. Keep them in your mind." Noah swallowed and nodded. Evelyn slowly reached for the strap of the radio near his boot, lifted it without disturbing his stance, and secured it to Dakota's empty saddle rig. The Mustang did not flinch. "He can carry this," she said. "You only need to carry yourself." Noah tried to smile, but fear held it back. "Where do we get out?" Evelyn looked toward the distant red stakes. Everyone there appeared smaller now, reduced to silent shapes against the Wyoming sky. "The same way I came in," she said. "You follow my steps. Dakota follows yours. No one rushes. No one proves anything." She turned, and the edge of an old metal tag slipped free from beneath her shirt, catching a brief line of pale sunlight. At the command terminal, Daniel Cross saw the enlarged image from the field camera and stopped breathing. Forewarned words were still visible across the tag. "Ghost Lantern 7. Wayfinder." Daniel Cross read the words twice before his voice returned. "Colonel Holloway," he said, "you need to see this." Nathan stepped toward the terminal without taking his eyes off Evelyn. Cross enlarged the sealed record until a faded personnel image appeared beside a narrow column of text. The photograph showed a younger Evelyn Mercer in a dark field uniform, her hair tied back, her expression calm, and both legs straight beneath her. Beneath the image was a designation almost no one at Fort Red Mesa had clearance to recognize. Ghost Lantern 7. Pathfinder Specialist. Call sign Wayfinder. Status sealed after Ash Valley. Holloway's hand tightened against the edge of the terminal. "That unit was listed as lost," Barrett said. Quietly, Cross scrolled farther. Most of the record remained hidden behind black security bars, but one line appeared in plain text. "Soul confirmed returnee. Medical discharge following extended recovery." Tyler Grant stared toward the field. The woman he had copied for a laugh was standing beside Noah with the cold wind pulling at her shirt and the old tag visible against her chest. She looked smaller from the boundary, but nothing about her seemed weak now. Evelyn turned away from Noah and studied the route back. The metallic tapping from the nearest marker reached her again. For an instant, the open Wyoming field became Ash Valley. Gray rain moved sideways through the dark. 6 figures waited behind her, each trusting the placement of her next step. Lieutenant Harris carried the radio. Mason kept count under his breath. Ruiz whispered a prayer he believed no one could hear. At the rear, a young officer named Nathan Holloway struggled to stay upright after losing his footing on the slope. "Follow me," Evelyn had told them. "Not the road. Me." The memory shifted. The valley floor had changed after the storm. Markers were gone. Instruments were unreliable. Every decision had become a choice between uncertainty and delay. Evelyn had moved first because someone had to. She remembered reaching the ridge. She remembered pulling Holloway over the final rise. She remembered hearing the others call from behind. Then she remembered turning back. Her left foot pressed into mud. The earth gave way beneath it. There was no sharp image after that. Only rain, voices, and the weight of dog tags gathered into her palm before daylight came. Evelyn returned to the present when Dakota breathed against her shoulder. Noah noticed the change in her eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am here," she said. It was not an answer, but it was enough. At the command post, Holloway looked at the old photograph and finally understood the memory that had followed him for 12 years. He had awakened in a medical transport with a stranger's tag looped around his wrist and a voice in his mind telling him where to place his boots. He had asked who brought him out. No one had answered. "She saved me," he whispered. Barrett looked at him. "Sir." Holloway stepped closer to the red boundary. His voice carried across the field, not as a commander addressing a civilian, but as a man speaking to someone whose name he should have learned long ago. "Wayfinder." Evelyn stopped. The call sign crossed the open ground and reached her like an old door opening in an empty house. Noah looked between them. Dakota lifted his head. Evelyn did not turn immediately. When she finally looked back, Holloway was standing at attention. Every recruit beside him followed without being told. Evelyn held Holloway's gaze for one quiet second, then turned back toward Noah. The salute behind her belonged to another life. The young recruit in front of her belonged to this one. "We are leaving now," she said. "You will place each foot exactly where mine was. Do not shorten the step. Do not widen it. Match me." Noah nodded, but his eyes dropped toward her uneven stance. "Your left foot drags. Then yours will drag too." She moved slowly, planting her right boot, pausing, then drawing the left forward across the soil. Noah copied her. Dakota followed behind him, the recovered radio secured to the light saddle rig. His ears moved between Evelyn and the ground, but his pace stayed calm. At the boundary, every recruit watched the three figures begin the long return. No one spoke. Evelyn counted each step beneath her breath. 1. Wait. 2. Breathe. 3. The rhythm carried her back to Ash Valley. Rain against stone, a radio failing in her hand. 6 voices behind her repeating the same count. Lieutenant Harris had asked how she knew where to go. Evelyn had answered that she did not know. She only knew where not to stand. Now Noah asked the same question in a frightened whisper. "How can you tell?" Evelyn watched a thin line of gravel disappear beneath darker earth. Pressure changes the surface. Water exposes what people cover. Wind moves grass, but weight bends it differently. She paused. Do not search for one perfect sign. Read what all the small signs say together. Noah followed her next step. His breathing remained uneven, but he no longer sounded close to panic. Dakota's hoof touched the ground behind him with a soft, steady sound. 1. Wait. 2. Breathe. Halfway back, Evelyn's left leg began to shake. Pain climbed through the old injury and settled deep in her hip. She stopped without warning. Noah stopped. Dakota stopped. From the boundary, Barrett took one step forward, then caught himself. Holloway raised a hand, keeping everyone in place. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. Ash Valley returned again. She remembered reaching the ridge with Holloway leaning against her shoulder. She remembered hearing the others call from below. She had been close enough to safety to leave. Instead, she had turned around. That choice lived in every uneven step she had taken since. "Mom," Noah whispered. Evelyn opened her eyes. "I'm still here." She shifted her weight and continued. 30 yards remained. Then 20. The red stakes grew larger against the gray field. Tyler Grant stood nearest the line, his hands lowered at his sides, his face empty of every careless joke he had made. 10 yards. Evelyn's breathing became the only sound she could hear. 5. Holloway stepped closer, but did not cross. "You have them," he said. She did not answer. One final step carried Evelyn over the boundary. Noah followed. Dakota crossed behind him and immediately lowered his head against Evelyn's shoulder. The recruits released the breath they had been holding. Noah turned toward her, unsteady but safe. "You came out there without knowing whether you could get back." Evelyn rested one hand on Dakota's neck. "No," she said softly. "I went out there because you could not." Noah had barely cleared the boundary when the medical team reached him, but Colonel Nathan Holloway did not move toward the recruit. His attention remained fixed on the worn tag resting against Evelyn's shirt. Dakota stood close beside her, shielding her from the wind while she tried to fasten the brace around her left ankle with unsteady fingers. Holloway stepped nearer. "May I see that?" Evelyn looked down at the tag. For 12 years, she had kept it hidden beneath ordinary clothes, close enough to remember and far enough from the world to avoid questions. She lifted it from her neck and placed it in his hand. The metal was scratched almost smooth. One corner had been repaired with 2 crossing lines of silver wire. Holloway stared at the repair, and the color slowly left his face. "I made this mark," he said. Barrett and Daniel Cross exchanged a glance. Evelyn said nothing. Holloway turned the tag over. Near the bottom, beneath the faded ghost lantern designation, were the initials NH carved unevenly into the metal. "Ash Valley," he whispered. "My identification tag broke during the storm. I tied it together with communications wire because I thought someone might need to know who I was." His voice became quieter. "When I woke inside the transport aircraft, this was wrapped around my wrist." Evelyn took the tag back gently. "You needed a name more than I did." Holloway looked at her left leg, then toward the field she had just crossed. The memory returned without fog this time. He saw the gray ridge. He heard a woman counting each step while he leaned against her shoulder. He remembered reaching higher ground, then watching her turn toward the valley again. "You went back," he said. Evelyn tightened the brace. "There were 6 people behind us, and that is when your leg was injured." It was not a question. Evelyn's hands paused. Dakota lowered his head until his muzzle touched her sleeve. "The ground shifted," she said. "I made it out." Holloway's expression carried the weight of what she had not said. She had returned for the others. She had survived. They had not. "All these years," he said, "I believed the person who brought me out had been lost with the unit." Evelyn stood slowly, favoring her right side. "That was the official version. Why did you let it remain that way?" "Because Ghost Lantern was not created to be remembered." Around them, the recruits had fallen silent. Tyler Grant stood a few feet away, his eyes fixed on the dirt. The limp he had copied now looked different to him. It was no longer an awkward movement. It was the remaining evidence of a decision he could barely understand. Holloway straightened, but Evelyn stopped him before he could salute again. "Do not honor me for surviving," she said. "Honor the people who kept following when the route disappeared." Holloway lowered his hand. For a moment, rank, age, and authority meant nothing between them. He was simply the young officer she had once guided out of a valley, and she was the woman who had paid for every step that brought him home. "I never thanked you," he said. Evelyn looked toward Noah, now seated safely beside the medical vehicle. "Then make sure no one ignores a warning because it comes from someone they have underestimated." Holloway turned toward Barrett. "Close the entire eastern range. Every marker will be inspected by hand before training resumes." Barrett nodded without hesitation. Tyler stepped forward and removed his cap. "Ms. Mercer, I am sorry." Evelyn studied him, then looked at Dakota. "An apology matters less than what you notice next time." Tyler nodded. No one laughed when she walked away. They listened instead to the uneven sound of her boots, each step carrying the truth they had been too careless to see. By late afternoon, the Eastern Range had been closed behind new barriers, and every training schedule at Fort Red Mesa had been suspended. Survey crews moved carefully along the ridge, while engineers compared the current ground to records that had not been questioned in years. Inside the briefing hall, the recruits sat in complete silence as Colonel Nathan Holloway stood before them. Evelyn waited near the rear door, with Dakota visible through the open entrance, his dark shape calm against the fading Wyoming light. She had asked not to attend, but Holloway had answered that the lesson belonged to everyone who had been there. "This morning," he began, "we trusted a map because it carried an official seal. We dismissed a warning because it came from someone outside our chain of command." His eyes moved across the room and stopped briefly on Sergeant Cole Barrett. That failure was not caused by missing information. The information was standing in front of us. Barrett rose from his chair. "The responsibility is mine, sir." Evelyn spoke before Holloway could answer. "Responsibility is useful only when it changes what happens next." Every face turned toward her. She stepped forward slowly, her brace secured again beneath her pant leg. The uneven sound of her boots crossed the floor, but no one looked down now. Tyler Grant stood near the front row with his cap held against his chest. Noah Bennett sat beside him, pale but steady. Evelyn stopped before the recruits. "You were taught to recognize confidence," she said. "That is not the same as recognizing competence. Confidence is loud when it wants attention. Competence is often busy watching what everyone else missed." Tyler lowered his eyes. "I judged you before you said a word." "You judged what you could see," Evelyn replied. "The danger begins when you believe that is all there is." She looked toward Noah. Today, he survived because he stopped moving when he did not understand the ground. There is no shame in stopping. There is shame in pretending certainty because other people are watching. Noah nodded slowly. Barrett stepped forward next. "I should have listened when you reported the shifted marker." Evelyn met his gaze without anger. "Then listen sooner next time. Not only to me, to the quiet recruit, to the civilian technician, to the person whose experience does not arrive wearing the uniform you expect." Holloway straightened. "Fort Red Mesa will formally recognize your actions." Evelyn shook her head. "Recognize the warning. Fix the process. That will matter longer than my name on a wall." The room remained silent. Holloway turned toward the assembled recruits. "Attention!" Chairs moved back in one clean sound as every soldier stood. Evelyn lifted a hand. "You do not need to stand for me." Holloway looked at her. "They are not standing for a rank." No one saluted. No one spoke. They simply stood straighter than before, not because she demanded respect, but because she had changed their understanding of what deserved it. Outside, Dakota gave a soft breath through the doorway. Evelyn glanced toward him, then back at the recruits. "Tomorrow, you will walk the range again after it is cleared," she said. "This time, do not begin with a map. Begin by looking at the ground." Before sunrise, Fort Red Mesa rested beneath a thin silver mist. The training grounds were silent except for the distant hum of survey vehicles and the soft movement of horses inside the stable. Evelyn sat on an overturned bucket beside Dakota, holding a cold pack against her left ankle. The Mustang stood close enough that his shoulder touched hers. He did not ask why her hands sometimes went still or why certain sounds made her look toward places no one else could see. He simply remained. Outside, footsteps approached across the gravel. Tyler Grant, Noah Bennett, and several other recruits entered the stable yard carrying new warning signs, measuring tools, and fresh red paint. They stopped when they saw Evelyn. Tyler removed his cap. "We were assigned to help the survey crew," he said. "We asked to start here first." Evelyn looked past them toward the eastern range. Along the boundary, every faded marker had been removed. New posts stood in their place, but the recruits were not relying only on recorded coordinates. They were checking drainage lines, soil movement, and the angle of the ridge before setting each one. Noah held up a small field notebook. "I wrote down what you said about reading all the signs together." Evelyn lowered the cold pack. "Do not write my words as rules." Noah looked uncertain. "Why not?" "Because conditions change. Learn the reason behind a lesson, or the lesson becomes another map you trust without looking." He nodded and added something beneath his notes. Colonel Nathan Holloway appeared near the stable entrance with Sergeant Cole Barrett and Master Sergeant Daniel Cross. Holloway carried a narrow wooden case. The base archive contained one item belonging to Ghost Lantern 7, he said. He opened the case and revealed a weathered unit emblem, its edges faded, its center marked by a lantern beneath 7 small stars. "It should have been returned to you years ago." Evelyn studied it for a long moment. Then she closed the case and placed it on the table beside Tyler. "Keep it here." Holloway frowned slightly. "You do not want it? I carry the people who wore it long enough." She looked toward the recruits. "Let it remind the living to pay attention." No ceremony followed. There was no applause. Holloway accepted her answer with a quiet nod. By mid-morning, Evelyn loaded her equipment into the old blue pickup. Dakota waited beside the trailer, but when she opened the rear gate, he did not enter. Instead, the Mustang looked toward the open prairie beyond the base road. Evelyn followed his gaze. The sky had cleared, and sunlight moved across the red cliffs in wide bands of gold. She unhooked the lead rope. "All right," she said. "We will walk a while." They left Fort Red Mesa through the northern gate, Evelyn on foot and Dakota beside her. The recruits stood near the repaired boundary and watched them go. No one imitated her gait. No one whispered. Across the pale dirt road, the Mustang left a line of even hoof prints. Beside them ran another line, one boot landing firmly, the other dragging slightly before finding the ground. The tracks were different, but they never separated. Some people followed maps because they trusted where others had been. Others survived long enough to become the path home.